Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. The sweater's back on, the sunglasses are off, the clouds are grey. I'm back in the UK. So after 7 weeks on the road, the last few days has been spent cleaning this thing. So moreover, it's been dust. And while on the road, driving around with the windows open, I know, I've gone through this entire vehicle and basically stripped everything out of it, and I have cleaned it as best I can to get all the dust out. There's still bits and pieces in crevices, but it's clean. Fridge is out, all the other stuff on the back here is out. This is now a clear load space. Now next week, I would have had this vehicle a year. And I wanted to share with you my experiences of having an L322, a 12-year-old L322, for a year. Now, when I first started talking about the L322 when I bought it, I planned on doing sort of mileage and then sort of minor and major faults. I've not really kept track of how much money I've spent. If I was to go through and list it, it'd be pretty frightening. But this was never just a budget build. This was always going to be something that I wanted to sort of build out what I had, very similar to the Defender as far as the dual battery system and all that sort of stuff. So let me go through some numbers to give you an appreciation. So I'm just short of coming up for a year. It needs to go for an MOT next week. And then I begin another year of ownership. So this vehicle, when I got it, was around about 137,000 miles. So I'm now sitting on 151,741. I'll put it up here for you. So I've driven about, and again, these are all approximate, I've driven about 13,480 odd miles. What's interesting is of those miles, about 10,000 of those miles has been in Europe, not here in the UK. I hardly drive it here. In the year I've had it, when it had its accident, it didn't go anywhere for a month. And then when I sent it off down to Emporium Tuning to do all the brakes and suspension, because of parts being shipped from Brembo to get the brakes redone, it pretty much didn't move for 3 or 4 weeks as well. So realistically, in that year, I've only really been moving in the vehicle for about 10 months. Now, of those 10,000 miles in Europe, I've calculated I've done about 4,000 miles off-road. Now, most of that has been done in either Spain or Portugal, but I've also done some off-road in Italy as well when I went to Sardinia back in June. I've driven through 10 countries. In a year, that's pretty impressive. If you don't want to include principalities, I would have had 12, because I went through Monaco and also went through Liechtenstein, which I think is a principality, or maybe it's a country, I'm not sure. But I did a detour through those as well. I also went through Luxembourg as well when I went to see the German guys at their event at the Nürburgring. I did a detour through the bottom part of Holland just to check the box, and then went into Luxembourg when I drove all the way down through the Rhine Valley into Switzerland. Now, I've set this thing, there are ways you can set the trip meters on these vehicles, and I've got a historic trip meter on it. So I've tracked both in kilometers and in MPG from when I've had this vehicle, when I reset it, to where it is today. And I'm looking at my iPad here because I can't remember these stats. So on average, my fuel consumption in kilometers has been about 10.2 litres per 100 kilometers. And roughly that's about 29.5 miles a gallon in total on that year's ownership. So of that 13,400 odd miles, I've averaged 29.5, which for a vehicle this size with a 4.4 litre engine is pretty impressive. Now, you can drive along and hit the information button and it will give you an instantaneous fuel readout. And I normally, when I'm sitting there cruising around doing long distance driving, which I've done quite a lot on this last trip, just will hit it just to see what it's like. Now, what's really impressive about this engine, especially married to the 8-speed gearbox, is doing 70 mile an hour, you're barely at tickover speed. And I've shoved my gap tool in when I've been driving along at 70. This thing is ticking over at 70 mile an hour at less than 1400 RPM. So that's pretty good for a size of vehicle that it is, and as heavy it is that it sits there cruising around at that sort of RPM. So with that sort of RPM, I've actually seen it hit 38.9 is probably the highest I've seen it, and that was when I went from Boltana all the way down to Castello Branco in pretty much one go. And then I was driving along just hitting it just to see how I could get that fuel consumption instantaneous readout. So that's pretty good that you're nudging 40 miles per gallon in a vehicle this big. Now, a few other things. My goal with this was always to sort of debunk the myth that they were unreliable. So give you a few other stats that I've done here. I've done 3 engine oil and filter changes. So if you average out the miles, and it needs another one now, that's about every 4,000 miles I've done an oil and filter change, engine oil. It's had 2 gearbox oil changes and filters, so the sump's off, that's where the filter is. I've had 2 of those, and that's working out about every 8,000 miles. I'm going to do one more. The reason why is I've not done a flush. I've just drained it, new filter, drained it, new filter, and I'll just do one more again. It's probably going to have to go down to Tim and import. So I'm going to get Tim to go do a full oil change. The transfer box has been changed, the oil has been changed on that, and both diffs have been changed as well. So that's full oil, everything out, and when they did the brakes, all the brake fluid came out as well. The only last thing I probably need to do is get the steering box fluid out, get that replaced as well. So when I first got this vehicle a year ago, all of that was done. So I had all of those fluids taken out of the vehicle, and really, for my own peace of mind, set it back as 0. That was day 0 for me on all the fluids and the service history going forward. And I generally look at service intervals now as something along the lines of roughly when the MOT is due, before or after. I'll clear all the fluids out and then go through another year. It's more for peace of mind, and because this vehicle is now sitting 151,000 miles, you've got to be mechanically sympathetic to what needs to be, with these vehicles. You can't go trashing it around, driving at 80, 90 miles an hour. I just don't do that. I pretty much set this thing around about 65 and 70 when I'm on the motorway, and I hit the cruise control, and that's it. I really don't drive this as I've stole it. So I'm more mechanically sympathetic that it's got pretty high mileage on it. I'm sure it's fine, but clearly there's things that needs to be looked at. So let's go with, in that year, major issues that have caused problems with the car. I've had one, and that's when the driver's side adaptive suspension system sensor on the top of the shock, the 2 wires rubbed their way through and caused a short. That was a £25 fix. That's the only thing that I would consider has been major. And so it basically ran through a series of Christmas trees, and I couldn't reset it. But that was a really easy fix. That was £25 to get a new sensor, which was sheathed where the wiring was, popped it out. It took maybe 20 minutes to fix it. I consider that the only major issue I've had in a year. Now let's go through some of the sort of proactive maintenance that could have turned into big issues. So the first one is definitely the compressor. So when I took this on its shakedown run in Spain back in January, the compressor in the back was beginning to make a pretty bad noise. You could hear it clunking. You could tell it was on its way out. So I look at that as, that's a warning sign. Now, it didn't fail on me at all. I was getting situations, if I pumped it into high mode when I did some off-roading, if I pumped it up in a high mode, I was getting raising slowly. And that's a sure error that this thing was on its way out. So I replaced that back out when I got back in February. Surprisingly, that's what caused the accident when it was off the road for a month, because I basically took it over there to the garage that will not be named and got them to sort of switch it out. And that's when the accident happened, during that event. So that was switched out, and that was going to look at more preventive maintenance. A few other things that I've had to do that, again, I would look at preventive maintenance to stop this vehicle in its tracks. And this is why I think these things get a bad rap, is people drive them, expecting them to be faultless, and then things break, and then immediately they start trashing them, oh, they're unreliable. So let me go through the list of things that I've done that I would consider to be preventive maintenance. So back in, I'm trying to remember when it was, August, I took it over to Tim at Emporium and said, brakes, suspension, go through the whole thing. If there's anything there that needs to be replaced, replace it. Now I knew the brakes were on their way out, the discs were beginning to get thin, the calipers were tarnished. I just wanted to refresh the braking system. Let's face it, it's an important part of the vehicle. So that was all taken care of. Was it a must-have? No, but I think it's something that if you know that there could be a problem and you know things need to be replaced, then replace them. So the braking system was replaced in August, or refurbished, let's put it that way. So I had new discs, new pads, and the calipers were all taken care of as well. The control arms, any bushings or the ball joints, again replaced. Top and bottom on the front were done as well, and then wheel bearings were done just because when the hubs came apart, when the new discs were put on, you basically got exposed. So if it's all apart, replace them. And one of them was not put in and seated properly, so it was actually at an angle. So it was good that we went through that exercise, because I could have had a wheel bearing go on me. So I look at it as preventative maintenance. When the discs were off, when the calipers were off, the wheel bearings were exposed, check them. If they needed to be replaced, just replace them. It's cheaper to do it then than having to take it all apart again and do it again. Makes perfect sense. A few other things. The air tank. I did a video of it probably back in, I think it was August again. Went down to Wheel at Utopia. We pulled the air tank out. Now it wasn't leaking and there was nothing really wrong with it, apart from the fact that it was beginning to show signs of corrosion. So I just took it out. It was 150 pounds. It took Will and I probably about an hour or so to pull it apart and put it back on. It wasn't an easy thing to do because some of the bolts were rusted in, but that was something that I thought was a preventive maintenance. If that goes, you've got problems. So it was easy for me to just go through, take it out, put a new one in. And it was showing signs of wear. You can see in the video, and I'll put a link somewhere up here so you can actually see what it was like. It was getting pretty thin on the top where all of the rust and all the crap had accumulated over 12 years. My driver's side heated seat element needed replacing. That was about 300 pounds. It took me half an hour to pull the old one out, put the new one in. That's not really a major issue. It's one of those things was, okay, it's a wear and tear item. There's been new handbrake shoes have been put in as well. There was a bodge job done on this at some point in time where only one side was actually pulling up on the handbrake. Don't know when it was done, don't know who did it, but Tim and the guys found there was a bodge where the handbrake wasn't working properly. So that's all been fixed. Again, another preventative maintenance issue that was taken care of. Now that's it. Those are the preventive maintenance things that I've done to prolong the life of this vehicle, getting ahead of things that, potentially could break before they break. Now that still doesn't mean a control arm won't go. I've got this annoying knock on the front, which I believe the front driver's side strut is on its way out. I know the passenger side front has been replaced at some point in time because the sticker's still on it. So it's been replaced recently, but I'm pretty sure that the driver's side one is on its way out. How old is it? No idea. So at some point, I'm probably going to have to look at figuring out how I get that new strut with a new airbag on the driver's side replaced. And that will be something that will be taken care of in the wintertime. I do know the bearings and the pulleys and the tensioners on the front need looking at. You can tell, you can hear it knocking. I'm pretty sure at this point, 150,000 miles, taking those all off, those tensioners and pulleys and bearings, and having them all replaced with a new belt, it's going to have to happen. It's something that, again, preventive maintenance, and I'll do that in the winter. So that's probably going to take quite a bit to do, and then I want to get somebody to go right the way through the engine and then just see what needs to be taken care of. I'm also pretty sure that my viscous fan needs replacing as well. I've got this annoying knock on startup. You can hear it sort of tick, and I'm pretty sure at some point in time that viscous fan, the bearings or the couplings in there is going as well. And once all the bearings and the pulleys and the tensioners get replaced, I'm pretty sure that we'll take the viscous fan off, find out there's a problem there and replace that. So that's it, 1 year of ownership, 13,000 miles, 10,000 in Europe, 4,000 off-road, done some pretty extensive off-roading. There's been a huge amount of dust chucked into this vehicle over that period of time. Just so you know, the air filters have come out every single time I've been away on these trips. And because I've got K&N, they get a thorough washing, and then I recoat them with the oil that comes in the kit when you go through and service them. I've done it again. They look pretty bad, especially the first one, because these have got sequential turbos. So the main turbo is the one on the driver's side where the airbox is. That's the one that gets the dirtiest because that turbo sucks in all the time. The one on the passenger side, which is the one that kicks in, I think, when you boot it, 2.5, 3,000 revs, something like that, that one looks pretty clean. So that just proves that that one wasn't used that much and the other one was. And what I generally do is that I would take the one from the passenger side, clean it, put it on the driver's side, the one from the driver's side, clean it, put it on the passenger side, and then rotate them backwards and forwards so they're getting an even wear, and I'm not just using one on one side all the time. I just balance them out. It's just something I've done since I've had it. But they do suffer. One other thing that I need to do, the pollen filter, looks absolutely disgusting. And again, that's all the dust and everything that's been chucked into this vehicle over the last year. I've got a new one on order. That's a simple 5-minute, pop it out, put a new one in, but that needs replacing as well. And I'm sure it doesn't help driving around as I do with my windows down in dusty conditions, but whoopee shit. So that's this week's update. 1 year of L322 ownership. Touch wood, it's not been on the back of a ramp truck. Touch wood, no major breakdowns. Niggly little problems? Yes. Preventative maintenance? Absolutely. And I knew that going in, but if I worked on the preventative maintenance schedule and was proactive in getting things fixed before they broke, I would not be one of the L322 owners would look at these as shitty vehicles. Clearly mine's not. Now, all you keyboard warrior Toyota owners who love to trash these vehicles, here's proof they are reliable. Here's proof in 1 year I've had one major issue, and it still didn't stop the vehicle. It just chucked out error codes. £25 to fix. Now you can argue I had all this other stuff to fix. Well, actually I didn't have to do it. It would probably still be fine, but I chose to do it to make sure it didn't end up in a situation where it had an error. Let's face it, it's a 12-year-old vehicle, got 151,000 miles on it. These things are going to need to be replaced at some point in time in their lives, if not multiple times. Things like suspension and the rest of it. And this is not a mall crawler. You've seen the videos, you've seen what I put it through. It's had a pretty tough year, let's face it. So yes, going forward, there are some things that need to be looked at. And I think this is where I turn the attention over the winter time onto more of the mechanical engine side of things. Not really done anything with it. In fact, I haven't, except do the oil changes that I've done. But I definitely think it's about time to look at some of the things that could go. And once all the front of that is out, if there's access to things like starter motor, probably the alternator, I would imagine at this point in time the bushes are pretty much gone, so get a refurbished alternator in there. Oil pump, water pump, any of those types of things that probably have not been touched at this point in time, then I'm going to basically get them to be pulled out, replace them, so I've got peace of mind going forward that everything is good to go for me into next year. Now, what does next year look like? So we already announced that we're going to do the Overlanding Forward guided tours. The first one we're still looking to do end of April or into the first week of May, we're not sure. That is now oversubscribed in the fact that we've got 12 people interested in going. So we think that we can probably take 10 comfortably and do 2 groups of 6. So Brian and I will lead. We'll probably have 5 in each group and then stagger them. We don't think we can do it. Legally, we don't think we can sort of convoy down the road with 12 vehicles. We'll break it up, but we'll figure out how to do that. But clearly, interest now to actually putting a deposit down and coming, 2 different things. But again, as I promised, we will start putting out more information in the coming weeks and months about what that ultimately is going to look like. One thing that we want to try and do in February, if anyone is interested, comments down below, or some of you that have contacted me, you know our email here. We are going to go and try and do a 7-day sort of sprint into Portugal. Now the ferries at this time of the year, as you get into winter, are only 2 a week to Santander. The Bilbao ferry doesn't run. We're thinking of doing the Trans-Portugal. So what we want to do is we want to basically go to Castelo Branco, all the way down to the Algarve, across from the Algarve to Segres, from Segres up to Sines, There's some brilliant trails all the way up there. And then from Sines all the way up to Setúbal, which is along the gas line. So when they put that in, what's left there is this wide open swath of sand cut through the landscape. So there's lots of scrub pine forests. They went right away through it, and you can drive on those. There's parts I think might be turned into private, but pretty much all of it you can do. So from Sines up to Setúbal is this gorgeous trail. Now I've done some of that. It's one of these where tire pressure's down, but you can go and get on it and drive it. So that's one thing that we're trying to figure out if we can do. Can we do it in a week? Can we get the ferry to Santander, drive to Castelo Branco, go down, across and back up and then home, and do that in a week to carry, to catch one of the ferries on the way back. So that's more a timing issue around the ferries in and out of Santander in February. If anyone is interested, comments down below, send us an email. We think 3 of us are going to do it. So realistically, 2 other people, if you want to join us, you can join us. We don't think this is going to be a guided tour because a lot of these we've not been on, but it's something that we want to do as well. Why are we doing it? Because we think latter part of the summer into autumn, we might go and run a guided tour then and do a 10-day trip south. We'll see where that goes, but we're trying to do 2, one to do the Spain Andorra route that we know, and then do another one latter part of the year, which will be the Trans-Portugal. The weather will still be good, campsites will still be open, most of them are open year round. So that's it. 1 year of ownership of the L322. It's been a great experience. It's a brilliant vehicle, and I look forward to another 12 months of trouble-free driving. And with that, I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.